but mostly we live in a very narrow-minded echo chamber filter bubble, not to
And I
underestimate.
think that is a really dangerous point, because the awareness of that is not that big.
Exactly.
And therefore, there's this seeming freedom and accessibility of information, of opinion. Um, but it's actually quite limited and narrow to what works for my type.
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. We are Kirsten
And Burkhard.
from the Akasha Yoga Academy. In today's podcast, we'll explore the topic of trust and truth as it shows itself in today's media landscape. So, in today's podcast, we will be touching upon social media versus our good old fashioned media. We will be touching upon all the problems coming along with that, from bias to fake to deep fake AI. We'll take it all the way to AI. So we will be looking into the topic of truth when it comes to media landscape, and we'll be also looking into how to navigate through this confusing sources of information.
Yes, so we'll start with a quick recap basically of what happened so far, meaning in the last decade or two, what did we get confronted with in the rise of the social media landscape and all its challenges for humanity, which came up over the last decade in that context. And then we want to actually focus more on the upcoming topics and challenges related to the artificial intelligence and the possibilities and difficulties around deep fakes, as well as the bias in those AI models. So this will be the main exploration. And then, of course, the question is the resolution. What can we do about it? How can we keep clarity? How can we maintain that trust in what is right, what is wrong, what can we believe, what is just completely made up fantasy?
Yeah, let's maybe start with the shift that took place already a little while ago. I remember as we were younger, newspaper was the trusted source of information, and all the mainstream media behind that basically established big media companies that would sell their information all around the globe, basically. And that is what we received as the truth that's happening all around the world. Today, it's actually not so much anymore that we choose our favorite TV news or our favorite newspaper. I feel quite a radical shift away from that into trusting social media more and more as a source, reliable source or trusted source of information, chosen source maybe of information, like who do I like and whose opinion do I feel I can trust and stand behind. So basically, we had a shift from this, we can almost say, how can we tell them this, established sources of media companies that would basically deliver to all countries around the globe, and this has decentralized, so to speak, and everybody can become a trusted source of information.
Yeah, exactly. I remember in the rebellious times of my teenage years and 20s, we were criticizing a lot the mainstream media and those centralized news agencies. Reuters being one of the most famous ones, but there's many others such as Bloomberg, and in different countries, different corporations in this media landscape are kind of
I
the
remember
central.
this time.
Exactly, yeah, they're like some central agencies of publication houses for newspapers and magazines. Then, of course, the TV channels like the cable and satellite news networks, and the ownership of those. Murdoch is an infamous
Yeah.
owner of many of those TV channels, not only in the US, but also in Europe and in Australia. So there's a lot of, in a way, centralized control over the opinion. Some people would say manipulation of the opinion
Right.
through those centralized agencies and their dependencies, because
Right.
they are of course affiliated with different corporate interests, lobbyism on that commercial level, and of course also the political lobbyism and
Right.
different interest groups in different countries and agendas which are being pushed through those main distribution organs via the news agencies to the single platforms such as newspapers, publication houses, TV stations, etc. So there were definitely already many problems around the accuracy and alignment, better said,
Yeah.
of the news already in the old days. So it's not a new
Right.
phenomenon, we can say.
So basically, the move towards social media influencers replacing basically mainstream media, centralized organizations seems to be a move towards freedom, towards
Mhm.
potentially more truth or
Mhm.
being closer to the facts, maybe a less filtered presentation of facts. But is that really true? Like when I'm thinking of fake news, of
Mhm.
also, of course, fully manipulated
Mhm.
information
Yeah.
coming through social media.
Exactly. Manipulation, also a phenomenon of the next era, in a way, in
Right.
the social media, which we experienced over the last decade, where on the first view sounds promising, what would be the name is the decentralization. No? Before, the
Right.
news agencies were very centralized, a few players, a dozen organizations, institutions who control the system. And the promise of social media would be the decentralization to distribute the channels more. The publications get multifold. There's not just 3, 5, 12 different authorities in the
Opinions.
field, but millions suddenly. So
Right.
decentralization, and ideally we could even say democratization.
Yeah.
So democratic access, the people can produce the news themselves. So that sounds good on the first view, and it's pretty promising. What experience shows is that it led, on the one hand, yes, to some more transparency. So many
Right.
benefits came from it. Things could be exposed, and no scandals, became more transparent. Also, with the whole information age of transparency, Wikipedia, YouTube, documentation of various types of exploitation, rip-offs by corporate entities who are whatever exploiting with low wage slavery, child labor, ecological problems, the Greenpeace type of movement around it, etc. So many benefits definitely came from that decentralization and more
Yeah.
transparency in
Yeah.
the internet, no doubt. And we could emphasize a lot on investigative journalism, which is also
Hmm.
benefiting from such resources online and networking, how those people can connect with each other, exchange information. Not to mention that we had the marvelous, heroic act of Edward Snowden. If you somehow
Oh,
missed
right.
and forgot about that one, please go back and educate yourself on the famous, in a way, the archetype of the whistleblower of the of this century. We can say already of the last 20, 30
Mm.
years, Edward Snowden, still living in exile, still today,
Wow. Yeah.
and he exposed like a shitload, we have to call it like this, of a gigantic archives of the most problematic secret information
Right.
of the secret services, the
Right.
infamous NSA and all their friends. We don't go further down that rabbit hole, but it was tough. Like, it revealed that the US government was spying on most of the political leaders of the European countries. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel had to admit, like, kind of like, yeah, well, they were spying on me. And she said, like, among friends, we don't spy. But it was just the reality of things.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't think it changed much.
Yeah.
It's just,
Sure.
we don't talk about it anymore. So, anyhow, transparency coming through that possibility of distributing such data. The famous platform in the context is WikiLeaks, and Assange, the founder of that platform, is still under political crossfire and
Mm.
threatened, and so on. So a lot of benefits came from it, no doubt.
So was that a move towards more truth?
In many ways,
Like, is
yes.
truth more accessible?
hmm I would say in many ways, yes, there is more transparency,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in many ways more difficult to hide things under the carpet. So definitely, I would say
Right?
there's
Right.
significant progress compared to 60s, 70s, 80s, where it was easier for the central agencies to control the public opinion. So there's definitely
Sure,
progress.
but is it not also easier to now control the consumer? Thinking of ads, targeted ads, thinking of fake news used for political campaigns. So, is it not at the same time also easier to actually manipulate and influence the
Exactly.
consumer, the
Ex-
end consumer?
exactly. I would say it's probably similarly accessible to manipulate the
Mm,
public opinion. It's just played in different ways. The game is played in different
right.
channels. So the means of this information warfare have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, one of the catches is that in the centralized old system, we could at least be somewhat clear like, yeah, obviously it's lobbyism, obviously it's
Right.
manipulation and opinionated interest groups, etc. But nowadays, where we have this decentralized, democratized system, we kind of live in the fake illusion that, yeah, I mean, it's trustworthy because it's decentralized and it's coming from the
Mm,
people. But then we underestimate the bias, and also still in the background the manipulation campaigns which are running. One of the biggest infamous examples of that in recent times was the Cambridge Analytica scandal,
right.
where specifically in the context of the Trump election, but also in other campaigns, user data of Facebook users was revealed on their demographics, and then targeted election campaigns and other manipulative campaigns were run to convince the people with their own arguments. So this is actually also
Yeah.
used in corporate marketing. I'll just give you one example. How, for example, petrol oil companies are delivering different ad campaigns to different demographics audiences.
Sure.
So
Makes
if it is
sense.
more the so-called iron belt industrial workers and the more Republican voter group, they would rather be kind of like, yes, so we got to bring the oil production back home and like save the domestic industry and the employment problems of that and so on. So they would run campaigns in that direction to please those
Right.
people. And then to the more metropolitan, democratic, woke, new generation, kind of critical alternative public, they
Mhm.
would put their greenwashing campaigns and how much they do to reduce their
Right.
oil production and save the environment and all of that. So this is systematically used to
Right.
manipulate opinions, and we don't even know about it. And
Yeah.
this is just one example of thousands which could be given.
Basically, the transparency is not only on the side of the information, but also of the receiver.
Yeah,
And therefore, kind of information can be targeted more strategically. Let's
exactly.
put it like that.
Exactly, because the transparency is not just in the possible news being revealed.
Not a one-way
Exactly,
transparency,
but of
but
course also the user is glass. It's the
right.
transparent consumer, where we don't have any secrets anymore about our preferences and
Yeah.
all our consumer
Yeah.
choices and our political orientation and our personality and mindset and our user engagement
It.
in the morning and in the evening and this and that and preferences and secret interests and so on. All of it is fully
Yeah.
transparent. We underestimate. Please, if you don't know it, if you don't believe it, educate yourself. Even if you're not on Facebook, the Meta Corporation is having a shadow profile of basically anybody.
Mm.
How? Because people share their contact, their address book in their phone. When you install the app, it's kind of like, ah, yeah, do you want to find all your friends on Facebook, Instagram, somewhere? It's so convenient, and we connect you with everybody. It's like, oh, yeah, that's a nice service. Upload your contact address book. And then in the user policies, it's somehow allowed for them to then match. Ah, okay, this name, this email address, that phone number. and then they get this not from dozens but millions of people, and they, with AI in the background, they cross-reference these databases. So even if we don't have social media profiles, a so-called shadow profile, they know about you. So this is just one example of so many which would be given about the transparency. Last famous comment on that one: if you think it's free, like Facebook, Instagram, Google search, YouTube, that's such a nice service. So generous of those companies. No, no, no. We pay with our data. And they would actually say, you are the product. The consumer is the product, and the data, which is our product, our private information, is sold in data brokerage companies
Right.
and advertising networks. And no, Facebook sells our data to others. Our data is a product which they sell to somebody else.
So basically, what we can say with this movement away from mainstream media companies to social media, in this decentralization, what we can see is an increased transparency on both sides, on the information that can be more transparently shared, but at the same time, also the user becoming, of course, much more transparent, and therefore manipulation changed.
Mhm.
Manipulation changed from thinking of lobbyism in big
Mhm.
scale into mainstream media. Now it gotten more versatile and subtle
Mhm.
and maybe targeted, we can say.
Exactly, targeted, and in this way more hidden, subtle,
Yeah,
as you say,
right,
and kind of in the disguise of no diversity, multiplicity, different opinions are somewhat tolerated, and so on. Of course,
right.
there can be exceptions, like in the lockdown, certain information wasn't tolerated in the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
news channels, accounts got blocked, etc.
right,
So a lot of enforcement also by the centralized agencies of what information was tolerated on the platforms, etc. So even there's of course limitations, but still it comes more or less under the disguise kind of everybody can say what they want. It's kind of a pseudo free speech, which
yeah,
Twitter X with Elon Musk tries to enforce a bit more than the other agencies, or the other social networks
platforms, yeah,
platforms. So yes, but that transparency, that multiplicity, diversity in the opinions, that freedom of speech, that is in a way, yes, an improvement, but not to underestimate how we believe and assume that we have that freedom of speech and clarity, transparency, but the so-called echo chambers and
right,
filter bubbles are, even apart from manipulation from agencies and no, election campaigns, etc., that we mentioned before, even just the subculture echo
right,
chamber of what is it about? Echo. It's kind of like I hear the same voices speaking back to me. We all kind of reconfirm our own bias. So I have a political opinion. I have a belief system. I come from a subcultural background, and we believe in these type of things, and it gets reinforced by, of course, because I see a lot of
yeah,
my friends, my interests, people that confirm with what I like. The algorithms on the platforms present me with similar content because they know what I like, and then I
mm,
engage even more, and then I think like this is the only truth, and we get more and more narrow-minded, and we don't even know what other people with other
yeah,
political interests and demographics are seeing on their news feeds. It is
yeah,
not even accessible to us. It
yeah,
doesn't get catered because it would cause too much outrage. Some outrage is good; they like it's good for the
mm,
engagement. So some provocation, okay,
yeah.
but mostly we live in a very narrow-minded echo chamber filter bubble. Not to
And
underestimate.
I think that is a really dangerous point, because the awareness of that is not that big.
Exactly.
And therefore, there's this seeming freedom and accessibility of information, of opinion. Um, but it's actually quite limited and narrow to what works for my type,
Exactly.
and for my subculture. And therefore, like this, I feel in the past, it was very clear to many that mainstream media is influenced, that there is lobbyism, that there is political opinion in it, political presentation in it. But now, with this move into this very personalized, free accessibility of information, um, it seems so free. It
Exactly.
seems so accessible. It seems like I'm the one who is determining and deciding where we go.
Exactly.
But it's not really like that.
Exactly. It's an illusion, and in a way, it's an ignorance to assume that
Right.
we are very neutral and objective, and that we can be very well informed. And of course, we can be putting the time and effort to inform ourselves.
Yeah.
But the problem is, of course, that time is extremely limited. And then, how well can we be informed on how many topics?
Yeah.
So, usually, practical time restrictions very much limit our possibility to get to the ground and the truth of a topic. We'll talk in a moment more about what is this truth anyhow about.
Yeah.
So maybe we can also move on there after acknowledging, in a way, the past situation with the more centralized news
Yeah.
agencies. And then we looked at what happened over the last decade, the social media news networks
Yeah.
in their decentralized, narrow-minded limitations, and the benefits of the transparency, also as we discussed it, without being black and white. It's not
Yeah,
about
right,
demonizing
right.
social media. Many political emancipatory protests were organizing
Right,
themselves
right.
across the social platforms, etc. So it's always a mixed cup, and not just shades of gray instead of black and white, but of course a color of rainbow of so many nuances, which we just briefly touched upon. But maybe we can move on to some
To
other
the
elements.
current hot topic, AI. Of course, we are all making our experiences with AI, I believe, and trying to work with it and have our first results and perhaps doubts or enthusiasm coming along with it. I personally found it very interesting to see that currently the accuracy of AI in fields that I'm knowledgeable about, of course, I can only speak about that, is hit and miss. And if that is in a field that I'm knowledgeable about, I can deal with that. I can deal with misinformation and filter basically misinformation out and
Because you
can,
notice, this is a mistake. Okay, no, this delete that, replace that, because you know.
yes, but I'm a little doubtful how that develops or where we go with that if we start using AI as a source for fields of a source of information in fields that we are not knowledgeable about. I somehow currently feel that AI is not yet really a source of information. It is a work tool, but it's not yet a source of information. And sometimes I'm really a bit horrified of what answers come across, and if I'm not discriminative because of my background, like how will that shape reality, truth, facts?
Yeah.
But where are we at? I know that you're so hot and educated, informed when it comes to AI. Like, where do we go with that?
Yeah.
Where
So
where are we at?
exactly. So what to see, just to be more specific and accurate of what we are talking about. AI, artificial intelligence, is actually a part of the machine learning, and it's a whole huge field. And what you are specifically referring to is more related to what is called the generative AI,
Yeah,
and specifically in the context of the language-based, the large
yeah,
language models
yeah,
(LLM), in this possibility which those specific AI tools offer in creating text. And actually, already now that text can be turned into audio. So
yeah,
you can also have those answers read to you in a voice of your choice. And then what we are actually working on is also with an avatar who directly speaks to you and transmits the response in real time to you, so you can directly have a conversation. So this
Right.
is the tool that we're at the moment developing. It's almost ready, actually, ready to launch. So that is the subfield of AI that you are asking about, which is different to, for example, image generation and
Right.
other aspects of
Yeah.
AI. So just to
Yeah.
differentiate what we're talking about. So on this text-based generation.
But even there, it's also
Okay.
the question of truth.
Sure, but before we come
Yeah.
to the picture and images, let's stay specifically at the
Yeah.
topic what
Yeah.
you mentioned, the
Please.
accuracy
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the language output when we have conversational um, no, text or spoken
Yeah.
language to interact. And as the name says, generative AI, it's generated, and it's generated from a vast, gigantic database of sources where there can be then the problematic copyright discussions around that, etc. So this huge knowledge base, and then the AI somehow out of this big cellar generates a response and tries to be accurate. But there is a very significant problem, which is acknowledged and seen as in a way, a root concern with those models, that they give wrong facts, wrong information, as you described it, that it's unreliable on facts, and that is technically known as hallucination.
Right.
So the model, the AI large language model, is hallucinating, it's making things up. So even if it doesn't know the answer, it still gives a response in a very convincing way, and
Yeah.
like, yes, it's exactly like this and that, blah, and it gives a compelling response which is completely inaccurate. And it seems very confident in that, and it's not so easy to spot if one doesn't know the facts. So that is the problem known as hallucination. What is interesting, to turn that just for a moment around, that it can be, depending on the usage case, actually be seen as something truly amazing, remarkable, and beneficial, because this hallucination is actually a creativity. The system is thinking outside of the box, and it's
Right.
very
Right.
good to generate new answers and
Yeah.
new possibilities.
Yeah.
And of course, if
Right.
we're looking for facts which need to match kind of our reality and information, then this is very unbeneficial. Of course, I understand the problem. Then it's not true, and it tries to convince me that it's true, but it's not, and so on. Of course, then we have problem. But if we think about brainstorming, creative
Right.
thinking outside of the box, and new possibilities which can be used, for example, in inventions, in scientific discoveries, in new explorations, huge potential in it. Similar things hold true in the generative art, in the visual
Yeah.
arts, also generating new creations which no human mind has ever been thinking of. And it can be so much more efficient. Already years back, they used it, for example, for aerodynamic design of whatever drones, planes, flying objects, or whatever type of product, where it can just pump out optimized, not following certain rules of physics and this and that, and then it can create new solutions to
Yeah.
old problems where
Yeah.
our human mind just didn't think of yet. So that just as a side note to mention that yes, hallucinations are a problem when it comes to facts and information, data which we
Yeah.
need to have accurately, but it can be actually seen as a asset, as a special ability,
Right.
which we
Right.
will appreciate a lot in the context of brainstorming, creative thinking. So that being said, the large language models at the moment have this problem, and they are not to be trusted when it comes to fact information of looking up somebody's biography and details of this and that, or all types of factual research are frequently not represented accurately. So I at the moment would not recommend using the standard OpenAI, ChatGPT, and related models for that. But there is, for example, powerful tools which combine the possibilities of the new AI with the standard internet browsing research. The famous tool in that context is called Perplexity, which brings together the best of both worlds and then gives quotes, sources, links to where you can fact check then that information. Of course, also in the internet, of course, we can acknowledge there's also a lot of fake information on other websites and so on. So it's still always to be taken with 3 pinches of salt and a lot of fact checking, and we come back to this understanding of truth later on. But so at the moment, don't use ChatGPT, OpenAI for facts, more like for creative thinking, brainstorming, bouncing ideas, etc. And related projects. Many of them can be very powerful to work together with an AI. Having also this personalized guidance, and the model that we are working on will have a conversational memory so that we can relate back to what we talked about last week, last month, accountability partner, having goals that we get reminded about, etc. For those things, a lot of potential.
So there's on one hand this problem of accuracy, but on the other hand, I hear also reports of friends that basically the information or the output is biased in a way, is opinionated. And if you go into certain areas that's outside of the opinion or the tolerated opinion of those systems, there's a clear feedback on that, that this is not recommended, not wanted, not right. So this is also interesting when we start now using that for brainstorming,
Yeah.
for creativity, for development. I feel we really need to be aware of that fact, kind of, that it is not neutral.
Exactly. It's not neutral. Technology is never neutral, even though it appears to be like just a technical medium and just a platform and just a system. And no, it's kind of appears to be non-biased because non-personal. And no, even it's not one person who built it, but it's like all this developer team, and they put all the information, and it seems to be kind of a quite balanced and neutral channel and tool. As we said with social media, the diversity of the opinions. The Republicans can have their opinions, the Democrats their opinions, and all is kind of there. But also there, we noticed that some opinions are also not tolerated. Some topics are also
Right.
excluded and cannot be talked about. And in the large language models of the AI, that is very important also on which data the model is fed, what data is included and what is not included, slash what are the parameters, what the model is allowed to say or not. And this is, first of all, a very beneficial thing, which is called alignment, is to align that response of the AI to values that we agree with. So humanitarian, humanistic values,
Yeah.
democratic values, no, like trying to exclude violence,
Yeah,
criminal
ethic
acts, hate
values. Yeah.
speech, like the democratic, modern values, etc. But then already there, different people have different opinions about that. Whatever the gender topic, different people
Right.
will have different opinions about this. What should be there, what should not be there. In the U.S., very infamous is the abortion topic. How neutral can it be? Political opinions. Then whatever in conflicts, wars. No, like who caused the war? We had this. So it's a topic as ancient as humanity, the misinformation during wars. It's a famous saying: the first thing which dies in a war is the truth, because manipulation kicks in, and that has been true centuries and millennia ago, and now is still a question. No? On the large language model of the AI on ChatGPT or other models, no, will it take any opinion? If I try to have a conversation with this AI and saying like, isn't it true that this president is responsible for attacking those people and so on? And then like, how will it respond? Will it take a side? Will it confirm my opinion and stay in that bias echo chamber filter bubble and confirm like, yeah, it's true? Or and then how does it respond to somebody else in another subculture filter bubble echo chamber with other demographics, etc., as we discussed before? So there we see it's not so easy for those Silicon Valley tech companies to build in that neutrality, because it's by nature biased, starting from by the nature of the data with which it was fed. So is it really completely diverse? But then also, how is it fine tuned? How is it aligned? What are the so-called guardrails? How it is kept in check? That okay, first of all, it doesn't go off board and doesn't build a chemical weapon and biological warfare and whatever type of cyber attacks, hacking, or whatever it could be, that the system could be misused with the information, data, and smartness it has. So that's, of course, the basic, which everybody's concerned about. But even apart from these kind of obvious cases where we would all more or less agreed upon that it shouldn't help you to plan a murder or a mass killing or whatever. Okay, we kind of agree mostly on that. Sure. but then we tend to underestimate the hidden bias in these conversational contexts of political preferences, cultural belief,
Yeah.
generally belief systems, the whole also US centric, Californian centric emphasis of those corporations and people
Mm.
building the systems. And then, well, okay, but does that really apply to the Indonesian people where we are here in Bali? Does this really apply to Korea or Uzbekistan near Russia? So, who's working on that actually very strongly is Imad Mostak with his company Stability, more open source models
Mm.
under the branding Stable Diffusion, not only on images but also for video and text based models. He's developing this open source system which every government, every culture, every company can attune and match to their subculture, that we have control over that
Right.
in our
Right.
individual bubbles and cultures and countries and corporations and groups, that we can attune it to our belief systems. And of course, then there's limitations, and we tune it. And of course, it can be used manipulatively again, of course.
Yeah. Right.
But at least there is a diversity in it and not a one size fits all Californication, as the Red Hot Chili Peppers knew already decades ago. The Hollywood California lifestyle opinion and worldview of the Silicon Valley companies for the world. We already had that in the last century a lot with this Hollywood lifestyle as an ideal around the globe. And I remember when we were 25 years ago in Latin America, how everybody was adoring these Hollywood stars, and kind of this drive of Latin American people to go to the US to find the perfect
Right.
Hollywood life in the US, etc. So we had lots of problems with this Californication already in the last century, over decades. So the question is, how can we avoid some of those mistakes and problems which we created in the old days? How can we avoid those in the future
Right.
with the new systems?
There's many questions coming up, especially when talking about this diversification of truth. Like, what is truth and all of that? Is truth what pleases me? What am I exposed to? What I'm delivered with? What's in your opinion in all of that a yogic perspective to put a foot on the ground when it comes to truth? Like, how do you differentiate, or do we give that up completely?
Yeah. So differentiation, I feel, is a key word, which we had in the positive aspects of the social media. Decentralization,
Right.
democratization goes also with a differentiation to be able to hear different opinions. And that
Right.
requires a certain open mindedness, a tolerance, an acceptance, and even an embracing of people with their different truths, and
Right.
accepting that, okay, this is your truth and I let you with your truth, because based on your demographics, upbringing, subculture, and your life experiences in this career and with those type of interests in sports, music, whatever your different bubbles are,
Yeah.
of course, from that perspective, I fully understand that you have this and that belief system. Okay, if you grew up here and you were around those people and you took that job, that education, this, that, then of course this is what your belief system is about, and then I can accept that. I don't need to fight you and try to convince you of something else and assume that my belief system is so much better than yours, because of course, we all think that we are right and we have the better
Yeah.
truth, and then we try to convince each other and change each other's opinion and so on. And where this of course makes sense if it's something like whatever violence or some human values, human rights, etc., sure, we can understand that I can try to convince you to stop abusing this or that person, etc., sure. But frequently we get hung up and go up on each other with emotional charges, kind of like, how can you be so stupid, so deluded, so crazy to
Yeah.
believe this and that? Yeah, I understand, because of your background. Then it makes perfect sense. If you grew up
Right.
in this country in that time, those circumstances, then I in a way have compassion. And what I remember our first Vipassana meditation retreat with Steve and Rosemary Weisman, their main book title was With Compassionate Understanding.
Mm.
So taking a step back and with that open minded, open hearted perspective and that tolerance and acceptance and ability to differentiate, okay, that's your opinion, that's personal opinion, I can accept, and with compassionate understanding, I can be more soft and actually
Right.
listen and receive. And then, okay, from your point of view, it's kind of fair enough, your logic
Yeah.
kind of makes
Yeah.
sense. I don't agree with it because it's completely contradictory to my upbringing, my belief systems. Like it doesn't match and it's not really compatible. But still, I can accept. Okay, that's your point of view. That's your worldview. From your side of the
Right.
coin, the coin looks like this. But there's of course not only two sides of the coin, but it's a manifold
Basically,
perspective.
an acknowledgement that relative truth is diverse,
It's relative. It's
relative.
relative. It's not an absolute truth.
Yeah.
There's many perspectives, many truths.
Yeah.
And I explored that super thoroughly in my 20s in the academic research when looking into Ken Wilber's
Yeah.
integral theory and writing my master's thesis using his integrating framework, where he very programmatically on purpose puts this multi-perspective, multifaceted view of the world. And I remember one of his strong statements is uh, no one human being can have the complete picture, the complete truth of the entire world. It's always going to be a relative perspective. And his attempt was to, in a systematic, differentiated, and smart way, bring together the different relative perspectives. And okay, you're looking at the world from this perspective. Then it makes sense that you see it like this, you describe it like this, and you have a truth because you're an expert in that and you're very knowledgeable. You have a lot of experience in that. So, sure, from that side, of whatever, let's say, physics or like a singular research approach of that or another science, that makes perfect sense. But then he would incorporate the system thinking, the more collective research where physics in itself doesn't have much knowledge about. So, okay, you have your part of the truth in the more singular individual aspects of physics, the system thinking, system theory, collective, and social aspects of research and science, they have their understanding. And they can go hand in hand and along with each other. And they seem to be contradicting on the first view, but this tolerance allows us again to see with compassionate understanding. Makes sense.
But we are here in a yogic quest, right? And the very foundation of that is satyam, truthfulness. How do you bring that together?
Mhm.
Is everybody looking for their own little bubble truth, or how do we bring that together?
I would say
How
there's,
to put that in a yogic
yeah.
perspective?
So I would say there's at least three levels of the truth which we can differentiate. So we have my opinion, my personal truth from my perspective, which we just discussed in great length.
Yeah.
So that's coming very much from my narrow minded perspective. And it's true for me because it matches my upbringing, my history, my belief system, my worldview, my subculture. Okay, that's my truth. And fair enough. You have your truth. I leave you with your truth. It will be more relatable and compatible if we have a similar subculture. Like for the both of us, very similar, very easy to be compatible. If somebody from the other side of the world, different age group and sexual orientation, political opinion, will be more difficult. But still, different truths in these relative perspectives have their value, their validity for myself and my tribe, my subculture. That one level of truth which we can see,
Yeah.
more or less individualized, subculture limited. Then the second one which we can see would be more or less shared values, and there we get into more political opinions and different subcultures, even within one country disagreeing and so on. But one in the Western world, somewhat agreed upon truth would be the human rights.
Right.
So this is like some charter, some no, fundamental agreement of human leaders over
Yeah.
the last centuries and decades who kind of again and again agreed on these humanitarian values, these democratic ideals, free speech and
Yeah.
right of movement, freedom of movement, etc. So such human rights. Obviously, they are very limited because no, whatever in Europe and USA we have the human rights, but then they only apply for Europeans. Africans cannot come to Europe and move freely. Okay. Um, so limitations, and of course, now if you're a violent criminal person, then also temporarily your freedom of movement gets limited, and you get put into prison. Okay, we agree on that, and there's of course a lot of negotiation on the details and so on. But
Yeah.
in a simplified way, we can say in the Western Hemisphere, people more or less, with lots of debates on the details, and
Yeah.
lots of disagreements, but generally we more or less agree on those human rights. Not completely, and different opinions, but more or less. But then, of course, it's the question, a bit like the Californication topic, of US values around the globe, then trying to enforce our Western modern human right perspective on countries in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, where they might culturally not agree with that. And
Right.
then it's a common problem that the Western countries come like, yeah, democracy for everybody. And our truth is kind of better than your truth. And sure, there's developmental aspects, more differentiated, nuanced, advanced forms of understanding worldviews, and more archaic, ancient forms. And then there can be debates which is better or not, and so on. But anyhow, so we have to come back to the three levels. The first one, my individual subculture
Yeah.
truth. Then we have more or less human truths, at least across different countries, continents, and worldviews, Western versus Asian
Yeah.
and Middle East, etc. So a bit more generalizable truth around that. So from individual, it's very limited, narrow-minded, and there's like millions and billions of different individual truths. Here we have like dozens of different worldviews, human right type of truths. But then you ask for the yogic perspective, then of course we want to go beyond all these relative truths, because still there's a dozen, and I still get confused. So is there one truth? Human rights and this version of the human rights and that version and that interpretation and that different culture which doesn't use the human rights, so what is true now? And then we come in yoga exactly with that question and topic. And you gave the headline in yoga, we discuss this theme under the term of satya or satyam. So satyam is usually translated as truth, truthfulness, sincerity. It's one of the virtues and ethics, the fundamental recommendations for the art of living, for this yoga in daily life. So that truthfulness, not lying, some obvious cases. Okay, don't deceive other people, don't make up things, don't lie. Okay, we kind of agree on that. But then already we're lying to ourselves. So we could be more differentiated about that self. I think one thing and say another and do yet another thing, this alignment. Your thoughts should agree with your words should agree with your actions should match your habits, and you should have that alignment in your being, integrity, etc., across myself. So, yes, we aspire for this truthfulness, transparency, sincerity. But when we go deeper, what we can see in the root of the term satyam is sat. And sat, as you know, means pure existence. So that absolute truth of being, which is beyond the relative truths. So there is, of course, the possibility to dive much deeper out of the subjective opinions of my mind, out of this belief system or that belief system, of all those relative opinions and perspectives, and stop all this noisy chatter of my mind and mouth and just become quiet. Because all words are relative, because they come from an opinionated mind. And the mind, by definition, is in duality. It thinks about good and bad, in past and future, and it has hopes and fears. And all the rest of the emotions are all based on duality. And as long as we have duality, there will be different opinions. And then where's the truth? So going beyond the opinions means going beyond the mind. How do we go beyond the mind? First of all, don't believe all your thoughts because they're not as true as you think. But even don't believe that thoughts are the only tool to figure out truth. Because we give a huge authority to the mind. We think like the mind is the king, it's the one kind of authority in this universe of humanity, this human centered existence, where my culturally charged, emotionally opinionated mind has the authority. Not really. So, in yoga and meditation, in these advanced practices of mindfulness and contemplation, we try to go beyond the mind and find that pure absolute existence, which could be called the truth, the absolute truth, beyond all the relative truths and opinions.
Right. What a ride. What a ride from mainstream media and social media to AI hallucinations, to absolute truth, to the position and place of mind and the place of stillness. So, this was our exploration today of the topic of trust and truth and today's social media landscape, and a perspective of where the truth and trust in yoga is positioned at.
Yeah, so who and what can we trust will become a very big topic over the next months and years to follow in the election campaigns, where
Right.
deep fakes and manipulated opinions will spread like wildfire virally around the globe. So contemplate, what is truth? Who can you trust? What are your sources of information? How can you reliably connect to something which is really aligned, not only with your own opinions, but with at least a humanitarian truth? And we can at least have some stable ground to stand upon while the carpet is being pulled under our feet. We need to be able to connect to the ground of being and have that stability and centeredness. Otherwise, these tsunami waves of viral misinformation will definitely blow us away.
Yeah.
So stay centered and keep shining in the spirit of yoga. Thank you so much for joining this Wisdom in Motion, and we're looking forward to exploring deeper truths in the future episodes. See you soon.